Valentine's Day started off like a dream. My boyfriend, who never seemed overly interested in big romantic gestures, surprised me with a reservation at a cozy little restaurant that I loved, the kind of place you go to when you want to make a memory. Everything was perfect. The soft music, the flickering candlelight, and him smiling at me from across the table. Toward the end of the evening, he handed me a small red box tied with a delicate ribbon. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting a gift. He wasn't the type to splurge on jewelry or anything like that. I untied the ribbon slowly, savoring the moment. Inside was a dainty heart-shaped pendant, simple but beautiful. It gleamed under the dim light, and for a moment I was overwhelmed by how thoughtful it was. I lifted it from the box to get a better look, and that's when I saw it. Tiny initials engraved on the back of the pendant. They weren't mine. I tried to brush it off at first, forcing a smile. "This is so beautiful," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But curiosity got the better of me. "Whose initials are these?" I asked, trying to sound playful. His reaction wasn't what I expected. He froze. His smile disappeared and his face went pale, almost like he'd seen a ghost. After an awkward pause, he muttered something about buying the necklace second-hand because it was unique and special. But the way his hands fidgeted, how his voice trembled, I knew he was lying. The rest of the night felt off. He tried to act normal, but I could tell he was distracted, as though his mind was elsewhere. When he dropped me off at my apartment, I gave him a kiss goodnight, but the pit in my stomach stayed. Something wasn't right. Once I was alone, I started obsessing over those initials. They weren't mine, so whose were they? I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I decided to look into it. My boyfriend wasn't big on social media, but I remembered seeing an old photo of him with his ex-girlfriend. Her name came back to me, and I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized her initials matched the ones on the necklace. The problem was, no one really talked about her anymore. From what I had heard, she had just sort of disappeared about a year ago, shortly before I met him. When I had asked him about her early in our relationship, he'd brushed it off, saying they weren't right for each other and that she had moved away. At the time, I didn't press for details. Now I regretted that. The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. I couldn't shake the feeling that the necklace wasn't just some second-hand trinket. It had belonged to her. But why would he give it to me? I decided to confront him the next day. I called him and asked him to come over, saying I needed to talk. When he arrived, I showed him the necklace again and asked him point blank if it had belonged to his ex. He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the pendant, his jaw tightening. Finally he said, "Why does it matter? She's gone." "She's gone?" I asked. "What do you mean by that?" He looked up at me then and his expression was ice cold. "You don't need to worry about her. She's not coming back." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? What happened to her?" He didn't answer. Instead, he gave me a strange smile and said, "You're next." I froze. He got up, walked to the door and left without another word. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing. What did he mean by that? Was he joking, threatening me? That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying his words over and over in my head. By morning, I was exhausted, but I was also determined to get answers. I tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. When I finally went to his apartment, it was empty. Not just him, everything was gone. His clothes, his furniture, even the pictures on the walls. It was like he had vanished overnight. I reported everything to the police, but there wasn't much they could do. As far as they were concerned, no crime had been committed. And his ex? She was still officially listed as a missing person, with no leads or suspects. To this day, I don't know what happened to her, or what he meant when he said, "You're next." But sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment, I hear faint whispers, and I swear I feel someone watching me.
Valentine's Day last year started off like any other. I wasn't in a relationship, so I wasn't expecting anything special. No fancy dinners, no romantic surprises. But when I checked my mailbox that evening, there it was, a Valentine's Day card. It was simple. A plain red envelope with my name handwritten on the front, no return address. I opened it thinking maybe it was from a friend or a coworker trying to lift my spirits, but inside there was just one line, written in neat, careful handwriting. "I've been watching you." At first I laughed. It felt like some sort of bad joke, maybe from someone in the office trying to be funny. I even texted a couple of friends about it, asking if they'd sent it as a prank. But nobody confessed. They all swore they had no idea what I was talking about. Still, I didn't think much of it. I threw the card in the trash and went about my evening. A few days passed, and Valentine's Day was already fading into the background. But then, the gifts started. It began with flowers, a bouquet of red roses left on my doorstep. No note, no delivery company sticker, nothing. Just roses. The next day, there were chocolates. Again, no name, no card, no explanation. By now, I was starting to feel uneasy. I lived alone, and it wasn't like I had a lot of people in my life who'd go out of their way to do something like this. I decided to ask my building's front desk if they'd seen anyone leave the flowers or the chocolates. But the security footage didn't show anything out of the ordinary. Whoever was leaving these gifts must have slipped in unnoticed. Then the letter came. It was a cold, windy night when I found it. A single piece of paper folded neatly and slipped under my apartment door. My heart sank when I picked it up and unfolded it. The letter read, "I see you every night in your window." I froze. At first, I told myself it couldn't be serious. Maybe it was still some twisted joke, something meant to scare me but not to actually harm me. But then I realized something that made my stomach drop. I lived on the 10th floor. My apartment wasn't near a neighboring building either. My windows faced an empty lot. No balconies, no fire escapes, no ledges, just a sheer wall of glass overlooking the city. The thought of someone being outside my window, 10 stories up, sent shivers down my spine. I locked every door, every window, and pulled the curtains shut. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching me. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound from the city below, made my heart race. At one point, I thought I heard something faint tapping against the glass of my bedroom window, but I told myself it was just the wind. The next morning, I forced myself to look. I had to know if anything was there, if there was any sign that someone had actually been outside my window. And that's when I saw them. Fingerprints. Smudged fingerprints on the outside of my bedroom window. My stomach turned. The prints were smeared, as if someone had been trying to press their hands against the glass for balance. I couldn't comprehend how they'd gotten there. There was no ledge, no scaffolding, no way for anyone to climb up, but they were there. I called the building manager immediately, demanding answers. They sent someone to inspect the window, but all they could tell me was that the fingerprints were real, and that they'd been made recently. I didn't even wait to pack up my things. By the end of the week, I'd moved out of that apartment. But here's the thing. Even after I left, the story didn't end. This year, on Valentine's Day, I got another card in the mail. The same plain red envelope, the same neat handwriting. It only said 2 words. Miss me? I don't know who they are. I don't know how they found me. And the worst part? Every time I look out my window at night, I can't help but feel like someone is out there, staring back at me.
This story didn't happen to me, but to a close friend of mine. Even now, just thinking about it sends shivers down my spine. My friend, let's call her Sarah, had been single for a while. Last Valentine's Day, she decided to give online dating another shot. She wasn't expecting much, maybe just some casual conversations. But then she met this guy. Let's call him Ethan. Ethan seemed perfect. He was charming, witty, and they instantly clicked. They messaged back and forth for days, and by the time Valentine's Day rolled around, he asked if she wanted to meet in person. He even offered to cook her dinner at his place. At first, Sarah hesitated. Meeting someone for the first time at their home? It felt risky, but Ethan reassured her. He shared his address, his social media accounts, even pictures of himself cooking to show her he was serious. Against her better judgment, she decided to go. When she arrived at his apartment, she was immediately impressed. The place was spotless, not a single thing out of place. The table was already set for two, complete with candles, wine, and a bouquet of roses in the center. It was like something out of a romantic movie. Ethan greeted her with a warm smile and a glass of wine. He was the perfect host, attentive, funny, and so effortlessly charming that Sarah found herself relaxing despite her initial nerves. The food he prepared was incredible, almost too good. She started to think maybe this was the beginning of something special, but then, little things started to feel off. For one, Ethan kept staring at her, not in a flirty, admiring way, but in a way that made her skin crawl, like he was studying her. And then there was this strange feeling she couldn't shake, like they weren't alone. She glanced around the apartment, trying to figure out what was making her so uneasy. But everything seemed normal. Until she excused herself to use the bathroom. On her way back, she noticed a closet door slightly ajar. Normally, Sarah wouldn't think twice about something like that. But she has this bad habit. She's always been a little too curious for her own good. Something about the closet caught her attention, and before she could stop herself, she peeked inside. What she saw made her heart stop. Inside the closet were framed photos, dozens of them, and every single one was of her. There were pictures of her walking to work, grabbing coffee, sitting in the park with her friends, photos taken from angles that made it clear she had no idea someone was watching her. But what made her stomach churn the most were the photos of her inside her apartment. Pictures of her cooking, reading on her couch, even sleeping. She staggered back, slamming the closet door shut. Her hands were shaking, her mind racing. How long had he been watching her? How had he gotten into her apartment to take those pictures? Before she could process what was happening, she turned around and froze. Ethan was standing there. He was leaning casually against the wall near the bathroom door, a smile plastered across his face. But there was something unsettling about it, something cold. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said, his voice calm and almost amused. Sarah's fight-or-flight instincts kicked in. She forced a nervous laugh and mumbled something about feeling sick, trying to inch her way toward the door. But Ethan didn't move. He just stood there, watching her with that same unnerving smile. Finally, she made a break for it. She bolted past him, yanking the door open and running down the hall as fast as she could. She didn't stop until she was outside, gasping for air in the freezing February night. When she got home, she locked every door and window, her mind racing. She wanted to call the police, but what could she say? That a guy she met online had pictures of her? That he'd been in her apartment without her knowing? She didn't even know his real last name, just the one he used on the dating app. For weeks, Sarah barely slept. She kept her curtains shut, her doors double-locked, and every sound in the night made her jump. She even moved apartments a few months later, hoping to leave it all behind. But here's the part that still haunts her, and me. Sometimes, when she's out in a crowd, she swears she sees him. Just a glimpse of his face before he disappears into the sea of people. It's always too quick to be sure, but it's enough to make her wonder if he's still watching her. To this day, every Valentine's Day, she avoids going out. The memory of that night, of those photos, and of the way he smiled at her before she ran, it's something she'll never forget. And neither will I.